In the early morning hours of September 23, 2015, at about 3 a.m., a doctor named Nick White was suddenly woken up by the loud sound of her doorbell and someone screaming outside her house. She lived in a semi-detached home on Ladysmith Road in Westbury Park, which is a quiet and wealthy neighborhood in Bristol. When she looked out from her bedroom window, she saw a man standing outside wearing only a pair of dark underwear. From his head to his shoulders, he looked like he was covered in thick, dark mud that was stuck to him in patches. At first, Dr. White was confused and thought it might have been a prank, maybe something silly done by students after a night out. But it quickly became clear that this wasn't a joke. The man was yelling for help, and his voice was filled with pain. Not long after that, another neighbor named Thomas Sweet came outside too. He lived in a ground floor flat nearby and had grabbed a golf club before stepping out. He had been woken up by the noise as well and thought someone might be in serious danger. He picked up the golf club simply because he thought the noise might have been animals, like foxes, which are often noisy in that area during the night. But once he realized it was a person shouting, he went outside, thinking he might need to help. Some other neighbors also came out when they heard the man screaming. As more people approached, they realized this was something very serious. The man in the street was stumbling around, clearly in pain, and what had seemed like mud was actually his skin. It was peeling off his body in wet, melting pieces, and he looked like he had been severely burned. The man was later identified as Mark van Dongen. He was 28 years old, originally from Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and worked as a mechanical engineer. He had moved to the UK in 2010 to study at the University of the West of England in Bristol, where he had earned his degree. After graduating, he stayed in Bristol and worked as a skilled engineer. At the time this happened, Mark had recently ended a long and difficult relationship with a woman named Berlinah Wallace. She was a 48-year-old fashion student from South Africa, and she was nearly 20 years older than Mark. She was also studying at the same university where they had met back in 2010 through an online dating site. One important detail about their relationship was that both Mark and Berlinah were living with HIV. In the months leading up to that night, things between them had become more dangerous. There were signs of abuse, and people close to Mark had seen bruises and scratches on his body. On one earlier occasion, months before the acid attack, Berlinah had poured boiling water on Mark while he was asleep. That attack followed an argument where she accused him of cheating on her. Mark thought the argument had ended and tried to go to sleep, but then she carried out the attack. He later told his father and friends about it and said he believed it was a warning of what she was capable of doing. Eventually, Mark decided he had to leave the relationship. At that time, he had started seeing someone else. He had met the new woman online, and they were beginning a new relationship. This new development seemed to make Berlinah even more angry. On September 2nd, 2015, which was exactly 3 weeks before the acid attack, Berlinah used her computer at her rented flat on Ladysmith Road to search for information about acid attacks. Investigators later found her internet history, which showed that she had looked into 82 different acid attack cases from around the world. She had read about the types of acid used, the kinds of injuries people suffered, and how badly they were affected. That same day, she went on Amazon and ordered a bottle of concentrated sulfuric acid. The acid was 98% pure and extremely dangerous. She arranged for it to be delivered to her home. Also on that same day, Mark contacted the Avon and Somerset police to report that Berlinah had been harassing both him and his new girlfriend. He gave them specific examples, including how Berlinah had called his new girlfriend several times but never said anything during the calls, which was clearly meant to scare her. He also told the police that Berlinah had once told him that if he left her, she would kill herself. The police took his report seriously and contacted Berlinah. They gave her an official warning, telling her to stop harassing him and letting her know that if she continued, there could be legal consequences. That same day, Mark also had a conversation with his father, Cornelius van Dongen. He explained how scared he was of Berlinah and told him about the boiling water attack and other physical abuse. He said he was truly worried that she might hurt him again and that her behavior was getting worse. Even though he was afraid, and despite some of his friends advising him to completely cut her off, Mark went to visit Berlinah at her flat on the night of September 22nd, 2015. It's not completely clear why he chose to do that, and this point would later be discussed in court. Some people believe he went there to find closure or to make sure she knew their relationship was over for good. For some reason, he decided to stay the night at her flat. That decision turned out to have terrible consequences. At around 3 in the morning on September 23, 2015, while Mark van Dongen was asleep in just his boxer shorts in Berlinah Wallace's bed, Berlinah quietly got up. She walked from the bedroom into the kitchen of her flat and picked up a 1-liter bottle of sulfuric acid. She poured the acid into a regular drinking cup or glass, making sure she had enough for what she intended to do. She then went back into the dark bedroom with the cup in her hand. She woke Mark up, either by speaking to him or shaking him awake. When he opened his eyes and looked at her, she laughed. Then, with a steady and cold voice, she told him, "If I can't have you, nobody can." That's what Mark later told people she said, and it showed she was acting out of jealousy and anger over his new relationship. Right after saying that, she threw the acid straight into his face, on purpose. As soon as the acid hit him, Mark felt unbearable pain. The acid began burning through his skin and deeper into his body right away. It was destroying his flesh and even affecting his bones. The pain would have been immediate and extreme, tearing through his nerves. Even though he was badly hurt and couldn't see properly, Mark managed to get out of the bed and escape the flat. He made it out onto Ladysmith Road, where he began screaming for help as loudly as he could. People living nearby heard his screams. Dr. Nick White and Thomas Sweet were among the neighbors who rushed out to help. They were shocked when they saw what had happened to him. They quickly called emergency services and told the operator that Mark's ex-girlfriend had attacked him with acid. While they waited for the ambulance, they took him into a nearby flat and put him under a cold shower. This was a very important step for chemical burns because running water helps to wash away the acid and slow down the damage. He stayed in the shower until the paramedics arrived. When the ambulance crew from the Southwestern Ambulance Service got there, they found that Mark had been badly burned. The injuries were all over his body, his face, chest, shoulders, arms, and legs. These were not surface burns. Most of them had gone through all the layers of his skin, which are called full-thickness burns. He was foaming at the mouth, which can happen when someone is in extreme pain or has trouble breathing from fumes. He was clearly suffering. The paramedics gave him strong painkillers right away, probably something like opiates, and took him straight to Southmead Hospital, which had a burns unit equipped to handle serious injuries. On the way to the hospital, Mark kept saying over and over that he couldn't see. One of the paramedics checked his eyes and saw that his left eye was already severely damaged. The iris had completely disappeared. It had been eaten away by the acid. The cornea was also likely destroyed, meaning he had gone blind in that eye. Even though he was in terrible pain and his condition was getting worse, Mark was able to clearly tell the paramedics and later the police that Berlinah Wallace was the one who did this to him. He gave them her name. He was also worried about his new girlfriend. He told the police to check on her to make sure she was okay. The police went straight to Berlinah's flat. When they got there, they found her calmly sitting on the sofa. She didn't seem upset or panicked about what had happened. She was arrested right away for causing serious injury with intent. Thankfully, the police confirmed that Mark's new girlfriend was safe and hadn't been harmed. At Southmead Hospital, Mark was taken straight to the burns unit. There, at some point, he was able to see what he looked like, either in a mirror or by some other reflection. When he saw how badly he had been hurt, he broke down. He started crying and said he didn't want to live anymore. What he saw overwhelmed him. His condition was so serious that doctors had to put him into a medically induced coma that lasted 4 months. This helped his body recover, reduced his pain, and gave doctors a better chance to treat him. He needed help breathing with a ventilator because of the damage to his body and the possible effect the fumes had on his lungs. The acid had done so much damage to his left leg that the tissue there died. It got infected and the blood flow stopped, so doctors had to amputate the leg to save his life and keep the infection from spreading. The burns were so deep that they didn't just go through skin and muscle, they even reached the bone. In some places, the bone was damaged so badly it had actual holes in it. The acid also destroyed his nose and melted away his left ear, leaving him with serious and permanent disfigurements. The authorities began trying to reach his family. Since they lived in the Netherlands, it took around 10 days for the police to contact them and let them know what had happened. Once they got the call, Mark's father, Cornelius van Dongen, and other family members immediately made travel plans to go to Bristol to be with him. When Cornelius arrived at Southmead Hospital, the staff sent him to Mark's room in the intensive care unit, but when he walked in and saw the person lying in the bed, he didn't recognize him. Mark's face and body had changed so much that his own father couldn't tell it was him. Cornelius actually went back to the front desk to ask if he had been sent to the wrong room. The hospital staff confirmed that he was in the right place. After going through months of intense medical treatment and being in a medically induced coma, Mark van Dongen eventually woke up, but waking up didn't bring relief. It was the beginning of an incredibly difficult and painful part of his life. At first, he couldn't move anything except his mouth and tongue. To communicate, his father used an alphabet board. He would point to one letter at a time, and Mark would stick out his tongue to choose letters. This slow and exhausting process was the only way he could express anything: his thoughts, his needs, and the pain he was feeling. Over time, and with a lot of effort, Mark was able to regain a little bit of speech, but the acid had done permanent damage to his spinal cord, and he was completely paralyzed from the neck down. This total loss of movement, along with the constant pain from the burns and the emotional toll of being disfigured and dependent, pushed him into a deep depression. The damage was not just physical. He had lost an eye, an ear, and his nose. His body was covered in scars. Because the injuries were so severe and upsetting to look at, the police and others involved in the case decided that no pictures of Mark in that state should ever be made public. They wanted to protect his dignity and avoid causing distress to the public. From then on, it was clear that Mark would need all-day medical care for the rest of his life, something that took away the independence he once had. On November 22, 2016, more than a year after the attack, doctors decided that Mark's condition was stable enough for him to leave the burns unit at Southmead Hospital in Bristol. He was transferred to a care home in Gloucester. This move was meant to be temporary, part of the UK's care system. But after spending just one night there, Mark couldn't take it. He called his father in a panic, begging him to come and get him. Cornelius didn't hesitate. He got in his car and drove from the Netherlands to England. When Cornelius arrived, he found his son in terrible shape. Mark was not only in pain, but he was also filthy. He was lying in his own waste, which made it clear he hadn't been properly cared for. Seeing this, Cornelius promised to take him away from that place. With help from family and friends, they arranged for a private ambulance. This special transport made sure Mark could travel safely and comfortably back to the Netherlands. Once Mark was back in the Netherlands, his family was able to find a much better care facility that could meet his medical needs and treat him with the dignity he deserved. But even with better care, Mark's health got worse. He came down with a serious lung infection, which is common for people who have limited movement and trouble breathing. To keep him alive and help him breathe, doctors had to do a tracheotomy. This meant putting a tube in his throat to remove fluid and assist his breathing. But the procedure took away his ability to speak. For Mark, this was a huge loss. Talking to his father, brother, and friends had been the only thing keeping him going. Now that he couldn't even speak, he felt completely cut off from the world. At that point, he made a very difficult and personal choice. He decided to apply for euthanasia. This is a legal process in Belgium which assists patients in extreme pain to die peacefully. Belgian doctors looked carefully at his case. They reviewed his physical and emotional condition, the pain he was in, and the fact that his injuries could not be healed. In the end, they approved his request. It was clear that his suffering was too much and could not be reversed. On January 2nd, 2017, Mark spent one last day with his father. They shared their final hours together. That evening, at exactly 7:15 p.m., Mark died by euthanasia at a medical facility in Belgium. He was 29 years old. In 2018, the trial for Berlinah Wallace began at Bristol Crown Court. Her lawyers argued that she shouldn't be blamed for his death. They claimed it was the doctor in Belgium who had ended Mark's life, not Berlinah. So, according to their argument, she shouldn't be charged with murder, only a lesser crime. During the trial, Berlinah made some very serious and false claims about Mark. She said he had been controlling and violent toward her. She tried to make herself look like the victim. She even said that when she threw the liquid, she believed it was just water, not acid. This didn't match what had actually happened. She went further and told a made-up story that Mark had left the acid by her bed on purpose, hoping she would drink it by mistake during the night. None of that was true. The prosecution had strong evidence that showed her story was a lie. They had her internet search history, which showed that she had spent a lot of hours looking up information about 82 different acid attacks. She did this in the days and weeks before she attacked Mark. That clearly showed that she had planned it. It also came out that she had tested the acid before the attack. She had poured some on a table in her flat to see what it would do. That proved she knew exactly how dangerous the substance was. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge in the case, Mrs. Justice Nicola Davies, made it very clear what had happened. She said the acid attack wasn't a mistake. It was something Berlinah planned in advance, and it was extremely violent. The judge described Berlinah's actions as cruel, cold, and full of hate. She said Berlinah was manipulative and controlling, and that she acted out of revenge after being rejected. The judge told Berlinah directly that her goal had not just been to harm Mark, but to destroy his life. She had wanted to disfigure him so badly that no other woman would ever want to be with him again. The judge said it was an act of pure evil. While the court in Bristol was listening to the full details of what Mark van Dongen had gone through, how he suffered deeply, both in his body and his mind, how his health slowly declined until he finally chose euthanasia, Berlinah Wallace showed no signs that she felt guilty or sorry for what had happened. Throughout the trial, she didn't appear to care about the damage she had caused. She kept repeating the same false story, sticking to her version of events, even though there was strong evidence against her. Eventually, on May 23, 2018, after the jury had spent a long time considering everything, they decided not to convict Berlinah Wallace of murder. The decision was influenced by her legal team's argument that Mark's death was not directly caused by the acid attack, but instead by the euthanasia he underwent in Belgium. According to the defense, this broke the legal connection needed to hold her responsible for murder under English law. She was also not convicted of manslaughter. However, she was found guilty of throwing a corrosive substance with the intention to cause grievous bodily harm. This specific charge recognized that she meant to do serious harm and that she caused terrible injuries. The judge sentenced Berlinah to life in prison. She would have to serve at least 12 years before she could even be considered for release on parole. This minimum term reflected how serious and cruel her crime was. Even now, years later, there's still a mark left behind from what happened. At the home of Dr. Nick White, the doorbell that Mark had leaned on while he was trying to get help after the attack is still damaged. The sulfuric acid that had burned his skin also burned through the metal on the doorbell. It serves as a permanent and painful reminder to the people in that quiet neighborhood of the terrible thing that happened there.